When working out if you actually have enough money to retire early, there is one question that you will probably wish you were never asked at all. It's a difficult question, an uncomfortable question, one that's wearing and it hangs in your mind, and you wish actually that you were never asked it at all. And that question is, can you afford to pay for your care in old age? And it's a good question, a pertinent question, but a very difficult question to answer. And I'm not wanting this channel to get political or anything like that. This is just my video journal about what I was experiencing at the time I was retiring. But when my financial advisor asked me that question, I squirmed. And I squirmed because deep down inside of me, I knew the answer was probably no, I couldn't afford to pay for it. And I knew that because sadly I've watched my own mother and my mother-in-law take the long trip into old age, ill health, dementia care, cancer care, and sadly terminal illness. And I know what a challenge those periods of time in old age are from a financial perspective as well as an emotional perspective. It's not great. And the work undertaken by the care teams here is nothing short of heroic in my view. And I'm in perpetual debt to the kindness shown by these such hard-working individuals who get paid so little to do so much. And therein lies the problem. The support you'll inevitably need if you live long enough, well, it costs and costs a lot. Even though the staff who provide this fantastic care get paid little more than the minimum wage. Now, yes, the government can support with attendance allowance if you're lucky enough to qualify for that, but it quickly gets exhausted by the costs of the care. And then you'll suddenly find that any savings you still have at the point when you need care, well, they quickly get eroded and exhausted. Now, if you live in England, once your wealth reduces below 23,250, or currently the government in England makes a contribution, and once your savings then reach 14,250, then you qualify for local government funding, although you'd still be expected to make a contribution from any private pension income that you receive. The important thing to stress here is it's all means tested. And if we're really honest, you get left with just enough money in savings to pay for your own funeral. And the good news is that the value of your house is excluded from this assessment until the point that you need residential care. And this then gets included within the means tested assessment. And with residential care can cost up to £80,000 per year. Then even the capital that you've realised in your house disappears quickly, especially if you both live a long life and both end up needing residential care. This is a conundrum. None of us know how long we're going to live, do we? Or whether we'll suffer illness or need any kind of care in the future. So planning for this is really tough. And how do you plan for it? My financial advisor asked me if I had planned for it, and I gave him the answer that I suspect most people do that are sat in front of them, and I hadn't planned for it. And if I have to be honest here, I'm relying on the equity in the property here to be the resources that I can call on if I do need to pay for care, especially as the cost gets big, in the future. So that was a Eureka moment that I didn't really want, because I realised then that actually if I do need care, then everything I've saved for over the years working hard to pay down the mortgage and everything else like that, well, I was going to have to rely on the equity in the property to pay for any care costs. And that felt really hard to say and admit that, if I'm frank. It's a bit of a punch in the stomach. You see, my generation were some of the first to be affected by what I now realise was one of the biggest sort of feats of social engineering ever conducted in this country, and that is being persuaded to join the housing ladder. Owning property is wealth, hey? Get a mortgage, upgrade your asset. We all believed that owning a house was a means to generate wealth, and probably naively believed that some of this wealth we would be able to pass on to our children. Now, back when I took out my first mortgage, I had no idea that there was a real possibility that what I was actually doing was creating a savings fund in case I needed care when I got older. That kind of blew my mind a bit. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong here. Owning a property, owning a house has had so many positive benefits in my life. And in terms of retirement, one of the key ones is that I don't have to factor in paying some rent into my retirement planning costs too. So there is an upside to owning a property as well. But it is, I think, a bit sobering actually having the discussion when you realise actually everything I've saved here, well, actually I might need to call on that wealth to actually pay for my care in old age. And it's quite disturbing, but it's also reassuring as well, knowing that at least you've got this to call on. And if I hadn't accepted that this was my actual only realistic contingency, what was I to do? The costs of care are so high that if you wanted certainty that you could fund all the care you might eventually need, well, I'd never be able to retire early, especially when we're talking about residential care or specialist care if you suffer a long-term illness. And even if I bought an annuity, well, I'd need to make sure that there was enough being paid to cover all foreseeable care costs in the future. And going back to this issue about residential care costs and being so high, £1,600–1,800 a week is not uncommon. Then, you're wondering, how on earth is anybody going to be able to save these kind of sums if you need long-term residential care? And until the point where I am needing residential care, there is also a bit of a realisation that if I am unfortunate enough to suffer some kind of long-term illness, that my existing retirement funds may not be enough, and I may need to rely on the welfare state to support me. Now, the ethics of this are not lost on me, and I honestly don't know what the answer is, other than what I've done, and accept that the wealth that we've built up in the property will at some point may need to be sort of called into use and be used to fund our care needs. And I think this is the elephant in the room when deciding to retire early. As if I was to retire later, obviously I'd build up more money, I'd save more money that could pay for any care needed in the future. But in reality, because of the costs of the care, it may still not be enough. And then working later and longer into life, well, that arguably increases my risk of an ill health event that would require care in the first place, in my view. How do you solve it? From a politician's perspective, you can see an argument to push up the ages at which state pensions are paid and the age from which you can withdraw your private pensions, because doing that ultimately reduces the financial burden on the state. And that's quite a controversial issue, I think, and would be a brave one for any politician to tackle. And as I said, I've got no intention for this channel or anything I'm doing on these vlogs to get in any way political, but it is, I think, an important realisation that you think these things through and work out what they mean for you and the risks you're taking as you take early retirement, because you are taking risks. So I've had to face up to the realisation that there is risk involved in this, financial risk. And, if I am unfortunate enough to become ill in old age, then what I've saved in terms of the equity into the property, into the house here, well, that's now at risk as well. And whilst I'm not working, I can't benefit from any sort of illness benefits that my employer might give me as well. That's not lost on me, and I'm aware of that. But I also think, personally, from my own family history and my own health history, that perhaps the government hasn't got too much to worry about. But also that there is enough saved and there is enough equity in the property to cover foreseeable care costs for a short period at least, for at least one of us. And I think on that basis, I am comfortable with the ethics of my decision. It is a tough one though. And thankfully, subsequent conversations with my financial advisor were a lot more cheerful. Is this an issue that you've given consideration to in your retirement planning? Let us know how you've tackled this conundrum in the comments below. I'd be really interested because it is a head scratcher for me. Thanks for watching.